I think the first question to ask is, why attempt survivors? Why is that group so important to us? That group is so important to us because they're at the highest risk of suicide. So if we're thinking about managing suicide, we got to talk to the people who are the highest risk to say, what's helping you? And the people who have survived, what was your turning point? What made a difference for you? And if you notice, most research that is done on suicide prevention is done with attempt survivors. So it's so important that we include them in our research. Why aren't we including them in our planning? Why aren't we getting their voice and saying, why don't you tell us what works? Why don't you tell us why that intervention worked for you? And also tell us why those interventions didn't work for you. Why are we not listening to them? To me, that is absolutely stunning and baffling that for so long in suicide prevention, we haven't turned to attempt survivors and asked the question. Now, we'll research them, but we don't ask them. We don't include them. So that doesn't make any sense to me, and that's number one. And number two, they're the highest risk of suicide. So we're talking about 7% of attempt survivors end up dying by suicide. That means also that 93% go on to live their lives. What is their story? We got to know what their story is. We got to know why they chose to live. When they got in that dark, dark moment, when they said it was all over, it's done, I am not going to live anymore, what was the reason for living after that? We got to know that. If we're in the business of instilling hope, we got to find out from them how they found hope and find that thing and give it to other people. So that's why it's so important. I'm learning what I learned when I first started working with attempt survivors, which is, and loss survivors. I don't think there's anybody who is more inspirational. You know, when you ask, oh, John, why do you do this? I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing. When I talk with attempt survivors who say, here's how I found hope, and when I hear from loss survivors who said, here's how I was so devastated by the loss of somebody, and I am now dedicating my life because I don't have their lives anymore. I'm going to dedicate my life to preventing this. And I'm in a position, I have the privilege to instill the hope from the attempt survivors and avenge those losses of loss survivors. That's what inspires me. So to me, I can't think of there being anything else I'd rather be doing. The National Strategy for Suicide Prevention does the right thing, does so many right things, but one of my favorite things it does is promote collaboration between agencies, between professionals, and between helpers and those that they're helping. So for me, that collaboration is absolutely key. So this is what we need to promote. I mean, we need to be thinking about collaboration in terms of the clinic. Listen, I have the absolute advantage of being on two task forces. I'm on the Clinical Care and Intervention Task Force, and I'm on the Suicide Attempt Survivor Task Force of the Action Alliance. And what that means is that we need to be on both sides of that equation. We need to hear the clinic. The clinicians have to hear the attempt survivor side and the other side. And to me, that collaboration starts with the guy sitting in the room with, or the woman, and the person needing help. So that's where the collaboration starts, and that is where we need to focus. Well, that thriving is what is mind-boggling. Terry is happier than she has ever been in her life. That to me is such an inspiration because she shouldn't even be alive. But now she's living this life that is a dream come true. And not everybody can do that. But what's possible when you come out of that darkness is you can see life very differently. And you understand what that darkness is like, but boy, do you appreciate that light in a different way. And so she has helped me, and Eduardo and others have helped me believe that that light is never to be taken for granted. because they found it, they grasp it. You know what? Eduardo said to me, I know this sounds kind of simple, but man, it's poignant. He said, being in suicidal crisis is the ultimate existential crisis. You're in that moment, making that decision whether to live or die. So not all of us get to that point where we really have to really look at the meaning of living and really care about it. But if you come out that other side, you're always open to looking for, thinking about and appreciating meaning, perhaps in a way that many of us don't. The problem with not setting it as a zero suicide goal is that you're almost saying, well, it's not preventable. We have to shock people who are of the belief that it's not preventable. That's the problem. There's not much we can do about it. If they want to kill themselves, they're going to kill themselves. But if we say, no, 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 zero suicide, aspirational goal, that shocks them and say, wait a minute, we can't do that. Well, maybe we can do something like it. Maybe we can prevent a few. Maybe we can prevent a lot. And maybe one day we can prevent all of them. But start with believing that you can prevent some. And right now, that to me is kind of a lightning bolt that says, boom, you can prevent suicide. And we need to shock our field in believing that again, because it's true, and they're not hearing it. The airline industry, when there's a crash, says, we can't let this happen again, because they know it's preventable. And you know, you could say, hey, look, airline crashes are going to happen. They're going to happen. But man, we got to do everything we can to prevent it from happening. If you say that we must have a zero suicide rate, the first question that or first thing that they say is, we can't. And then you say, well, you can ask them the question, is suicide preventable? And if they say no, then that's the beginning of their education. That's the beginning of our opportunity to say, let me show you something. Let me tell you some stories about some attempt survivors. Let me show you some evidence. Let me blow you away with the fact that there is, right now, trainings available that can save lives. Right now there are services that are saving lives. You can be a part of those. Or you can turn away and say, we can't do it, and still call yourself a clinician. This is, I think, a shame for our profession. It's also, I think, about fear, just fear, that clinicians are scared of suicide. A, they're not prepared to deal with it. B, since they're not trained to deal with it, they think they're suckers for liability. And they're going to get sucked into some legal system that is going to strip away their ability to practice as a clinician and shame them. And you know what? It feels bad to have somebody die by suicide that you're working with. So all those things are reasons. And so there's a tense, you know, when you're afraid of something, you want to control it, right? You want to say, okay, I'm going to control that thing. So I'm going to tell it what to do. I'm going to make it do things because it scares me. If I let it go, it'll be out of control and I will somehow get punished. Something bad will happen to me. But one, if we equip them with the right training clinicians, and if they work with attempt survivors regularly and hear the voice of attempt survivors, and so they learn that suicidal thoughts does not a suicidal person make, but there's something you can do about it, and if you collaborate with them, they'll tell you what's going to help them. So to me, it is absolutely critical that clinicians begin to not only get training, but work with and hear the voice of attempt survivors. But for all those years, we've been treating them like bad children, and who should be seen and not heard, and maybe not even seen.